Hello and welcome to this exciting episode of Attune In. I'm thrilled and so grateful to be joined today by Natasha Silver Bell. Hi, Natasha.
Hi, friend. How are you?
So good to see you. I'm really well. Thank you so much for being here. It's early where you are, so I appreciate this. I'm so excited. We've worked together, obviously, and you know about the work that I'm doing. And you're a mum of three, you're a working parent, you've got so much knowledge, you're an expert in your field. And as you know, our audience are really curious to understand key sort of foundational principles around mental well-being for the long game, and how parents can support children in that process, and how a lot of that requires us to attune in so that we can attune to them. And this is something you do, this is your passion. That's the vision I'm getting from having met you and worked with you. I'm going to read out your bio so listeners know about all the amazing things that you do. Natasha is CEO and founder of SilverBell Global. Natasha brings over a decade and a half of expertise in mental health to her leadership at SilverBell Global. As founder and CEO, Natasha curates socially relevant dialogues with leading practitioners and clinicians to deepen conversations around mental health. And I've been at some of these events, and you really do create, that is exactly what you do. You create the space, you create a vessel for real authentic reflection. And that's something I've witnessed, and it's really quite palpable. And,
Thank you.
people are starting to want to think about this topic.
Yeah.
And you kind of give permission for that. So I want to say thank you to you.
Yeah.
You serve as ambassador for Partnership to End Addiction and vice president of NCADD Westchester's board of directors. You've co-founded the In-Service Foundation, which supports underserved populations, the Megan Ann Foundation, providing legal support and community-centered services to survivors of intimate partner violence, prioritizing their children's well-being. In 2026, Natasha and SilverBell Global will host the fifth annual East Meets West and Beyond Restoration, Psychoeducation, and Mental Wellbeing Retreat at the Balkan at Castle Ashby in Northampton, UK, which is where we first met. And it's a very dear place, facilitated by world-class healers, physicians, clinicians. I mean, there's so much that you have done. And I just want to say thank you for your contribution, first of all. And what are your thoughts around the topic of parent-child connection and your reflections as a mom?
Well, thank you, Dr. Seth. I'm a mom of three, as you mentioned, and my kids are out of the house now. Um, I'm a farm girl at heart from Montana. And so when I was raising my kids in New York City and they were going to schools there, having animals in the home was a difficult thing to do, but it was natural for me to have guinea pigs and dogs and cats and fish and lizards and all the things that help my kids become attuned to others. And I think that's what animals teach us is, yes, we need to be attuned to ourselves as parents, but how do I help my children besides socially at school? Because I think one of the pieces with school in today's modern society is school is so overstimulating for kids. And there's so much going on that they have to learn in the classroom and regulate to other kids' needs. And where's that sense of self and calm? So when they come home, I want to create an environment that's calm and peaceful. At the time, I did not have the TV on much. And then I don't have the TV on now at all as my kids were getting older. Having a quiet home is really important for them to drop in and regulate their own nervous system. And so, to your point, though, as a mom, I had to be finding that core and center first before they could find theirs. And so I'll leave it at that to pivot in which direction you feel you want to take this kind of like monologue open statement.
Absolutely. I mean, it could go anywhere, but really you recognize that you do need to sort of have some space for yourself, for your nervous system, as the first foundational step to supporting your children with the environment for their nervous systems to be regulated. And do you think in reality that do you find that hard, or do you have you nailed this now? Have you got strategies that really work for you that you can lean into to center quite, how are you doing this?
Well, it's because, I'm trying to think about your audience and who's listening. And, the kids can be many different ages. And there was a season where I went through a lot of adversity as a mom, and I'm a sober mom now for quite some time, 17 years consistently. But I began my recovery journey 23 years ago. My eldest is 23, 21, and 19. And so I went through some adversity of reconciling how substances weren't helping my life, and I thought they were. I thought I was a better mom if I had a little bit of wine or this or that, but for my journey, it wasn't as helpful as I thought it was, and I had to come to terms with that. And so as I found my core and center instead of the substance, I found that quieting the home, lighting a candle, putting some incense on, gently slowing down my day within the home helped create that tool, if you will, that then created the opening for my kids to come home and walk into a more serene environment versus me having music on. And I love music, and there's a time to dance with your kids, which my kids will tell you, and my daughter in particular, we had dance parties in the house. But there's a time and place for that when it's child-centered and child-led instead of mother-led. I want to create, the Montessori way of raising, children in nursery school, but having as kinda like a blank slate when you walk in the door, so when kids come home with their overloaded nervous system from school and homework and friends and fights and girls and, the girl fights and whatever that go on in middle school, you want your kids to come home and they get to dictate the terms of what the afternoon looks like. Yes, it means homework. Yes, it means a snack. And yes, it means maybe washing your hands or lying down for a little bit. If they have that luxury, and because sometimes after school, there's a soccer match or there's extracurricular activities or tutoring or violin lessons or whatever it might be. So when they do finally come home, whatever time of day that is, to create a serene of environment so that they drop into what they need to do next in order to then be productive with their evening, which usually requires studying.
Right. Love it. So really child-led and that's fine, I'm sure maybe there are some people listening and maybe they fear giving too much or they worried that if everything's exactly how their child wants, will that kind of raise a sort of expectation? But actually what you're saying is the focus is on their nervous system and being attuned to what that needs. So it's not necessarily what they want, but what's good for their nervous
That's
system.
Thank you for clarifying, 'cause you are I as it's coming out of my mouth, then usually the next question from a parent is, "Well, wait, am I just to allow them to do whatever they want? Watch TV, play video games?" Well, that's actually a yes and no and. You know what I mean? It's a both and because you know your child best. I really typically did not allow my kids to come home and play video games right away. I did have an expectation that they should be nourished physically with some food and they should prepare to look at their afternoon and say, what do they have on their plate? Let's say they're in fifth grade, right? The demands aren't too rigorous at school yet, but enough where you have to prepare. And so of course, they want to play video games, or of course, they want to, get on their iPad or whatever, even back then. And I would say, okay, well, how much homework do you have? How do you plan to get it accomplished? I really put the ownership on their work on them. I am not the one that would sit down and do it with them. One, because the truth is, I didn't have that capability to do the math in high school. A lot of parents do have that, and that's great that they can do that with their kids. I didn't have that capability. So my kids had to be really independent in how they resourced getting their work done, whether they had a tutor or after school, the teacher would, or an aide of some kind if they got stumped. But most of the time, my kids could do their work and then they would, set up a process for success. And I really liked giving them ownership of it. And to me, that's different than saying you get to do whatever you want with your evening. No, I had an expectation homework would be accomplished. And if you were going to get stuck with your homework, how are we going to fix that? Do we need to call a tutor, a friend, a teacher, make extra time, stay late, go in early, and have them have agency over it? And I have always found that when I stepped out of their way and allowed them to manage their workload on their own, that if something was starting to fall, that they would have this agency to feel that versus the mom coming in and going, oh, no, I have to fix this. They're failing. If my kid came to me and said, Mom, I need your help with this, of course I'm going to help them and send an email or whatever if I can't physically help them with their homework or mentally do it with them. I wait for them to ask for help. And I think that's a huge distinction between parents who are like, okay, let me see your homework. Let me help you get it done. That's great. But then you're, in my opinion, you're covering up their self-agency to have ownership of that accomplishment. Like when they're little, putting their socks on by themselves. If it takes an extra half hour, your day is going to be an extra half an hour late. And what a win that will be for your kid when they get that sock on by themselves.
Couldn't agree more, and I love that. And actually what you're saying is so nice for parents because actually you're saying less is more, and we and actually a healthy attune dynamic will support their competence, self-competence, agency, self-reliance, and they need space for autonomy in the day. And I guess, they go to school and there's probably not a lot of autonomy going on there because there's rules and there's cues and there's, well, yeah, exactly. So we have to be conscious of that. And it gives us less to do. And in a way, we are doing them a favor, right? But we're doing them a favor, big favor.
The most important thing I can say to parents listening, if you were to listen and walk away with anything from this moment and that you're hearing Dr. Seth and I, is that helping your kids find their motivation, or if they have the motivation, not getting in the way of their motivation to succeed. Because it's naturally like we're all trained in our company in the polyvagal theory through Deb Dana, who I know you know and have met, and she's amazing. And she's a co-creator with Stephen Porges, and she was the voice of the polyvagal theory. And she'll always say in the stages of the nervous system, whether you're in a dorsal state, which is more of a collapse, a depressive feeling where you just want to isolate, or a sympathetic state where you're just more activated in fight or flight, is that your body knows how to get back to ventral, the curious, fun play state. She goes, let the body do what it does. And if that means it has to vacillate up and down, that's why you see your kids go through a manic stage or a curl up on the bed stage, letting them just have those feelings and letting them just process and say, okay, you can come to me when you're ready. There's nothing wrong with you. And so I think that was something that I just naturally did. And then when I met Deb Dana 6 years ago, she changed my life, and how I then understood. I was like, yay, me. I did something I think that was pretty decent with my kids. I did things that weren't so decent. Happy to talk about the things I wish I would have done differently. But I think giving my kids a sense of ownership and agency, all of my 3 kids are motivated. They are so motivated to succeed. And that's the biggest piece that I see. And unfortunately, in our company, a lot of kids come to us, families come to us with kids who have lost their motivation. They have lost their understanding of how or what to live for, or why should they bother, and it's like, even if kids are born into privilege where a survival instinct hasn't kicked in, that there is a motivation piece in them still. The survival piece is so important, and I want to get out of the way of that.
Lovely. So, so true. And, I feel that you're describing us as parents, we have to give our children an opportunity to build those muscles a little bit. Like if you always lift the thing for them, their muscles aren't going to grow, and they need that muscle. And you're talking about motivation. So I have a question for you around, so in order to sort of, when I think about being a conscious parent, so as opposed to being on autopilot, because it's so easy, right, to be just autopilot reacting. There's the parent we want to be, and then there's a parent that we actually are, and they're not always that close together, right?
Well said. That's exactly right. Very
Right?
true.
But that's okay. That's part of the way it's gonna be, but it's just that how much, A, we're aware of the deviation, and then B, not beating ourselves up, not judging it, but noticing it. And some of that I feel is around being conscious and aware of our sort of intergenerational things that, we will have seen when we were children from our caregivers. And I just wanted to ask you your thoughts on that piece, intergenerational stuff, being conscious. And do you have any sort of reflections or tips or strategies?
I do have an awareness that's coming up that I want to share in this moment, is that, your parents will do certain things that you don't want to do, right? I think we all have that, oh, my mom did this, so I don't want to do that, right? And I know what I don't want to do. And I remember when I was saying this at dinner last night to some friends, and they had younger children. And my therapist, when I got pregnant with Sam, I was telling her how I'm going to raise him, and I'm so excited, and I get to be this mom that, I want to be. And she's like, okay, so you know what you don't want to do, some things your parents did. You're not going to make those mistakes, but you'll make others. And I was like, what do you mean I'm going to make other mistakes? I'm not going to make any. This magical thinking as a first time mom, I thought I was going to get it right and perfect. And it's great to have that motivation to want to be the best mom you can be. And to also, to your point, to have some grace with yourself and know that sometimes we're going to go back and forth between what feels good and what doesn't. And then you just don't know how to be a mom until you are one. You just don't know how to be a parent until you have that child on your lap, and and then thank goodness God does it slowly, so that you get pregnant over 9 months, even contractions are minutes apart, so you can rest in between. And when a child grows every night, you're the doctor, don't they grow in 90-day 90-day intervals. So they do like a physical growth, and then they do another 90-day mental growth, and then they do another 90 days physical growth. And like that's how the year goes, the first year of development. That's what my pediatrician was educating me about. You're
Right.
not going to see the physical and the verbal all at the same time. That's just not how the creator designed us to grow in this world. Like nice and easy, gentle, not all at once, so that mom actually can play catch up, so that you walk, you crawl first, then you walk, then you, or you sit up and then you stand up and then you walk. And it's the same thing for language. Unless you have one of those kids that just does it all at once, which I didn't. I had it in stages and layers. Thank goodness. I
Yeah.
don't know if that answers your question, but
No, thank you. I think it's sort of, yeah, you're speaking to the whole flow, isn't it? You're in a flow and children are in a flow. We're in a flow. We're learning, they're growing. And I think it's hard for parents who may have a very sort of, especially maybe professional working parents. There'll be people listening to this who are very, very aspirational with their careers and things go a certain way and it's very logical. And then they become parents and actually nothing is logical. We're all sleep deprived. You may get your routine down, but then they'll start teething or they'll be unwell. And there's a real resilience that I think parents we need, and we need that cognitive flexibility to be able to shift gears all the time. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. And I think that isn't easy actually.
I was mentioning to you, I did another podcast and we didn't know which direction we were going to go in. And it ended up being talking about the things I wish I would have done differently as a mom, as a working mom. And um, we just posted about it on LinkedIn, and we wrote about how my daughter used to, we would do tea time together, and I would take one more client or I would entertain one more guest. And when I would come home an hour or two later than when I thought I was, she would be curled up around her tea set with it gone cold and she's asleep. And those are vivid memories for me that I didn't have to entertain one more guest. I could have come home 1 hour earlier. And I think that there is some real value to turning off work and leaving it outside the house. That was some great advice. A child psychologist, Marcia Greenberg, who helped me really co-parent the kids. She would teach the teachers at the master's program at NYU in New York City, and she's written many, many books. Marcia Greenberg, child psych, she's brilliant. And she would say, Natasha, when you do enter the home, leave work outside. Come
Mm,
home if you need to change your clothes. So when you walk in the door, they can run and hug on you if they have sticky, wet, painted hands or grimy hands or whatever they might have, so that you don't have to say, oh, no, 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 I just have to change. I just have to change. Go to the bathroom before you come home. Turn your phone off before you come home. Change your clothes before you come home. So I would do my best. I wouldn't always get that right and perfect, but I did understand that when I walked in that door, I needed to be really present.
yes.
I was, truth be told, because I built my company from like 2011, and that's when cell phones were really taking off. So I think I was learning as the company was growing, and I wish my kids do make a joke like, Mom, you were on your phone more than we were, because they weren't allowed phones until a certain age, anyways. But
Mm,
I think something really valid to, as a working parent, yes, I'm driven and my kids do, we've all had repairs in our relationships now, but there is a big missing feeling for them that mom wasn't really present when
mm,
she came home, or when she wasn't really there. Even though I would go through this whole routine with them about how they're going to do their homework. To your point, I was dropping into creating function for them to be successful, but I wasn't doing the connection piece. I was in the mom, let's go, they've got things to do. And I think there's a time and place for that. But as we know, creating moments of really dropping in attunement and connection are really powerful, even if they're 10 minutes. How can you create that once a day for each of your children so they know that you're there? And it's not easy. If I could get it once or twice a week, I was at a win for each child. And, as a mom of three, it was so hard. That doesn't mean that when I wasn't nourishing them or feeding them, that they weren't attuned and I wasn't attuned, but you know what I'm talking about, those T-set moments.
totally. I mean, thank you for sharing that and so authentically. And I would love to ask you whether you think about what you think about rescripting. So have you tried to talk to your daughter now and say, look, tell
Yeah.
me how it what did you feel in your body? What thoughts went through your mind? And then always like saying, right, you thought this,
Yeah.
this was the reality.
Yep.
Have
Yep.
you managed to do that?
Oh, we have quite a handful of times. In fact, we just posted about it in response to this interview because it's pretty raw and vulnerable. It's a 45, 50-minute interview. and it's called I'm Fine. And then our social media team thought it would be good to get Sarah, my daughter, on there because she has more of a lived experience now in repair. And so she talks about what it was like exactly and what was it. She goes, as a little kid, you don't know. You just don't know. But you need information, she goes, but not too much information. I know why you didn't say certain things now, mom. I know why you didn't share with me why you had to work late because you needed to provide for me or what but there is a way to I think there is this drive button in working parents or people driven like myself and you. I'll speak for myself. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to provide for my kids and create financial stability. And they understand that now, and I still could have come home 1 hour earlier, you know? There's a little dance I could have done.
Interesting. So that's something that, if you had a magic wand, is that something that you would have done differently?
I would have gone back early I would have come home earlier. I would have
Mm.
come not home at 6 or 7, I would have come home at 4:35, and that means the client that I would have had to find another time to see me.
Right, right. That's it. Do you know, I think it's really interesting because I don't think people are really explaining to parents, like if someone had told you that, you would have done it, right? And I think that's the point of these conversations.
Sarah now would have said, "Hey, mom, I'm gonna feel really extra abandoned. I got divorced, so their kids didn't have he was around, but I was a single mom, so it was even more important that I provided, and that's what Marsha Greenberg and I would talk about is, like, you working and providing income means you're going to be okay, and if mom, to your point, isn't attuned and okay in her nervous system, how are the kids gonna get what they need?" And had Sarah been 10 years older going, "Mom, this time right now where I'm in 5th and 6th grade is really important. I'm alone. My brothers might be home, the nanny might be there, but I'm alone and I need you."
It's so powerful. Because I think we as mums don't realize how much gravitas we have. We think, we can outsource, and to a degree, yes, but we don't realize. I think maybe it comes down to self esteem, maybe that we need to recognize parents have a huge role in that's what the child wants, but
They
then
want
that's what they want, but there's so much, and I mean, I don't know, like, now I have young children and the kind of invisible load is getting out of control, like, WhatsApp messages, group conversations, schools, like, a lot of our comms is now so we're just, "How on earth?" "This thing is not
Yeah.
happening. This
Mhm.
is not."
Well, it's not. It's interesting. There's so many ways I want to share with you. My son's at university at Trinity, Benjamin, who you've met, and he's talking with his friends. I met him in London recently for some dinners, and they might go back to pen and paper because the phone at school is one cheating in AI or whatever, but it's not an asset. People aren't learning like they used to. And then, like last night at dinner, again, I was talking with these parents who are younger, and these Teslas are great, but self-driving cars are not how we get our children around, and I took a very strong stance, and anytime somebody says, "Isn't it great? It'll be so efficient. Your kids can go to school with a robot." I'm like, "No." Like, I am so adamant about knowing that the child needs their parent to show up and not outsourcing. I mean, and I outsourced a lot. I'm guilty of it. I was a single mom. I was trying to do everything I could, and it was not if I could have been more places at one time, I would have figured out how to do that, but, 3
Mm.
different schools, that wasn't an easy lift, but outsourcing to a robot is just like, wow. Unless the parent makes it part of their fun, magical journey together in some way, like, that just isn't gonna end well. I can tell you that now, you know?
Yeah. Wow. No, thank you. If I said to you, what handful of things do you just wish all parents knew, like as a mum, but also from your own childhood? Because I think the parent-child connection that we have with our children is informed by what was sort of normalized, right? But if we're conscious and attuned and we're reading and we're learning, it's perfectly possible to sort of be a little bit more intentional with what things are going to look like. And I'm sure because of the work you do and all the amazing sort of ecosystem that you've created, you must have so many nuggets of wisdom, right? And I wondered, what are the few things that you just wish all parents.
Number 1 is slow down.
Mm.
Slow down. Where's the fire? The goal, like it's the journey, not the destination. Now, granted, we don't want to tardy all the time. And maybe if you are tardy all the time, we relook at that morning routine, right? And slowing down, pausing. I think my kids always say, "Mom, you rushed so much." And I would catch myself and slow down and regulate as much as I could catch myself, and that's the blessing. Is like, can you catch yourself rushing? Can you put little reminders and post-its in your house or little signs that say, "Slow down, don't forget to breathe. It's okay." You know, there's the goal is the journey with your kids that you're providing for them, and if you're anxious about getting to the kids out the door, ask yourself, "What's the hurry?" Well, usually when I would go through this process, I would ask myself, what is the hurry? The hurry is I don't want them to be late because I want them to know how important it is to be on time for things because your future work will depend on you being on time. And then if they aren't on time, what does that mean for me? That means I'm not a good mom. And so in the end, it always came back to what about me? And that's the shift in perspective that I would let go of. So it's like really readjusting my attunement. What's the goal here? And having to really ask myself, why am I rushing? Because I want to be the perfect parent. I want to make sure my kids write things. And yes, but there's a way you can go about it that extra, like they even say when you're speeding, you only save like an extra 2 minutes. So when you're rushing, how much time are you really saving in the wreckage of not connecting with your kids or creating that dysregulated nervous system where you're rushing out the door is what they're feeling is not the goal, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. I think what you've described there is, I think it's so true that we as parents, it's as if we think it's all about how we're showing up. So then
Yeah.
that puts us in that sort of state of
Mhm.
performing and trying to not make mistakes because it's about us performing as the mom we want to be. But actually,
Don't even know that we're thinking about us. We think we're thinking about the kids, right? What we're teaching them. But to your point, if we actually take a step back and look, what are we really thinking about? We are thinking about us.
whoa, that is such a I think that is really interesting because the capacity to zoom out quickly in those moments and realize actually there's so much more than us.
Happens
The
here.
things that are happening that we're trying to sort out, there's only so much we can even control. There's so many factors out of our hands. And why do we attribute so much to ourselves? That's the pressure. So we're doing that, then we need to interrupt that, right? So it's such a powerful example of flowing with what's natural. I think modern day lifestyles, there's a lot of pushing into boxes, and then we're not able to flow and actually when you resonate and align with the natural, that's when you get the exponential benefits.
So they get to have that autonomy because in the end, if you keep overriding their nervous system and forcing them to do things, you're going to have a kid that's going to fail. They call it in America, I hate this term, but failure to launch, or you have kids that spin out at university or they can't keep up or they don't know what it's like to wake up on their own, do what they need to do. So there's lots of yins and yangs to all of this conversation. And it's not an all or nothing. It's not just this way or just the other way. It's mix it up. Like you said, keep the flowing, experiment a little bit on how your kid can perform best.
Lovely. No, thank you for that message. I think it also leans into neurodiversity and thinking in a neuro-inclusive way. Our brains, they are so different. Everyone will have a slightly different brain and slightly different aspects of their brain. And it's about optimizing and meet and trying to just synergize. And I think as a parent, what does that look like in a life? In life, it's probably having space to be curious and notice that your son you noticed about his natural rhythm. So it comes down to tuning in, basically.
That's right. That's right, and he was different than his older brother and his younger sister who could get up in the morning. They didn't like it either as teenagers. I think just teenagers are meant to sleep, and listen, that's a whole nother episode where, the schooling system in America or certainly the 8 to 3 or the 9 to 5 or whatever it is this cubicle that I don't think we were like a lot of people. Like my kids are all entrepreneurs. My kids are now pursuing things and passions and hobbies that are not usually in the classroom, even though they're doing university. One of them isn't. Samuel, my oldest one, I think you met him too. He does music production and he's so motivated. Like, what do you want for your kid? Is university the end all? And sometimes that's not the best answer for a child is university. And I know a lot of parents cringe when they hear that, but there are other pathways of creating motivation in kids who want to sustain a passionate life that they love.
Lovely. And, letting what more as a parent than having your child love and have joy and being able to be autonomous. I mean, that's exactly it. I know, Natasha, you do a lot of work in the addiction space. You're really passionate about thinking about the systemic picture. Are there any sort of reflections or insights that you have that you think, from the work I've done in this space, I can see that this would be helpful for parents? If you had a rewind button for some of your clients, what would you do with that space?
Parents should talk less. Yeah. Just be quiet, listen to your child. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them. And my little tool is like when they're coming home and complaining about something or they're venting, hallelujah. Don't fix their problems and do not give your opinion unless they ask you for it.
Wow, that's
It's
really helpful.
so powerful just to let your kid, because if your kid is starting to complain or yell or scream at you, that means they're communicating. And what we get concerned with is the kids who have shut down and are isolating and are not communicating with the parent. So if you get a little glimmer, as Deb Dana says, if you get a little glimmer of a little something, if they even walk in the kitchen, make yourself be off your phone, start doing a puzzle, put on a show you know they like, fix the food you know they like, lure them out of going back into their room. Do whatever you can to get them to keep coming out without demanding it, controlling it, or making them do what you want them to do, because they might do it for you, but they're not really gonna lean into you and feel safe.
Wow. And is
Yeah.
that what you see as the the downstream effect? Sometimes it's not good.
Well, if your child doesn't feel safe enough to come to you for the little things, how are they gonna come to you for the big things? And if they're not connecting with you, and I don't care what the connection is the connection. Just allow that. Yeah, you wanna change fights into more calm. That's why I suggest, doing things that might lure them to want to do something with you. Like my dad, I ended up, obviously I mentioned in recovery, but when I was starting my addiction in my teenage years, where 90% of addictions begin in the teenage years. And my parents knew something was off. They didn't know what. And my dad made me go bowling with him. My goodness, I could have just died. I was so embarrassed to go bowling with my dad. And this is in the 90s. And I've let him know since, but I really appreciated that. Like, I didn't have the language as a 16-year-old defiant girl to say, thanks for spending time with me, dad. I wouldn't have owned that. I wouldn't have admitted that.
Mm.
But that's what I was feeling, and I knew what he was doing, but I didn't want him to know that he was doing the right thing.
Well, thank
Yeah,
you.
and so he found ways through to show connection with me to the best of his ability, and then we give grace to our parents for not knowing what they didn't know. I certainly wasn't able to communicate and tell them, "Yeah, I'm using drugs all the time. Guys should know. You should be spending more time with me."
Mm.
But I
Yeah.
wasn't making it easy for them.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I don't think, a lot of parents, we don't always necessarily know how to make sense of the communications that are coming from children. Sometimes the spiky pushback that you get is a communication. No, right? But no one, and that's one of the reasons why I want to have these conversations, that I think if more parents realized what that pushback and spiky behavior actually could mean, and if we're more curious about it rather than thinking, I think a lot of parents these days are like, wow, you're entitled, you're rude, you're ungrateful, where's the gratitude? And actually, we almost need to give permission to parents to have a complete, have a more compassionate.
Yeah, without compassion without permission, and I think there's a difference there. So if you can understand that if you are concerned about your 13-year-old who's isolating or not coming out of their room or they're not playing with the friends they used to, I like to have an open door policy, no locks in the houses. That's another one, so that no one can isolate themselves. Even when my kids would play video games, I would go in and sit and watch with them and I would cheer them on and I would be a part of it. It was an open door policy, so I could come in at any time and sit with them while they played and watch them. And they actually thought that was cool. And
Hmm.
I would cheer them on, whether it was so the video games, although, yeah, there was a season where my boys were playing a couple hours every night after homework. Hey, well, that's where we were in that season. I didn't judge it. I didn't get mad. I didn't fight it. I was with them in it so that it didn't become this escape route for them. And that's another piece of addiction is the isolation and the gaming things. It's an escapism.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, thank you. Thank you, Natasha. And
Yeah.
tell us more about the work you do. I know you work with people in London, in the UK, all worldwide. So tell.
By God's grace, I started this company 14 years ago, unbeknownst to me, and we put multidisciplinary teams together to help families find a new ethos system that can be effective to sustain healthy lifestyle choices, whether it's age 12 or 35 or 22. Sometimes there's a hiatus from university and we want to get people back on track and they don't have to go away to treatment. And we are the treatment instead of that. And we have therapeutic companions that help kind of live with our clients to co-regulate into self-regulation and find those passions and hobbies and interests that create the motivation for them to want to get better.
Nice. Well, thank you. And tell us, how can people get in touch with you?
Through our website, silverbellglobal.com, there's an inquiry. And just we'll get it. Our teams will get it. And we're on Instagram and LinkedIn. And I love the work that you do and I fully believe in you. And I'm glad that you've done this podcast. I'm so happy to be on it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Likewise, Natasha. It's been such a great conversation. Thank you for your time.